19 years ago, a female worker in Detroit left her shift on a rainy night and vanished without a trace, leaving behind her stalled car, wallet, and ID untouched in the trunk. Authorities suspected a neighbor who was seen near the scene, but with no body and no evidence, the investigation quickly hit a dead end. Yet, through all those long years, a young female detective never gave up hope, believing that somewhere in this rusted city, a piece of the truth still lingered. Then one day, while reviewing old files, she uncovered a small detail overlooked for over a decade, a detail that could turn the entire case around. Before we dive into this haunting story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on revived cold cases like this one. On the night of April 12, 2006, in Detroit, Michigan, a light drizzle fell on the rusted tin roofs of the Southwest Industrial Area, where abandoned warehouses and broken smokestacks cast shadows on oil-slicked streets. Angela Wade, 32, left the Marshall and Gray textile factory after a grueling 12-hour shift, her breath still tinged with fabric dust and dye fumes. She slung a black bag over her shoulder, phone in hand, and hurried through the flooded parking lot, hunching against the cold wind blowing from the Rouge River. The factory's security camera, tilted on a corner of the roof, captured her passing a row of cars, the flickering light dimmed by moisture. A silver Chevrolet parked near the gate, engine off, suddenly flashed its headlights, sweeping across Angela's face, causing her to pause. In the blurry frame, she tilted her head, smiled, and turned toward the light. That was the last time anyone saw her. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Angela's car still sat alone in the lot, doors locked, keys in the trunk, wallet and ID untouched in her bag. No one saw her return to the factory, and her phone had been off since the night before. Her sister Janice called repeatedly, each unanswered ring fading into silence. At 9:15, Janice called the factory, and the manager confirmed Angela wasn't there and hadn't requested time off. Janice drove to the lot, standing before the rain-soaked car, her hand trembling as it touched the cold hood. There were no clear footprints, only a few muddied tire tracks. At 10:37, in a panic, and with a voice choked by tears, Janice called the Detroit Police Department's emergency line. "I think my sister's missing," she said, her voice breaking amid the sound of rain pelting the car windows. "Please, help me." Her voice trembled, blending with the wind whistling through the iron fence. On the other end, the dispatcher asked for her name and address, promising to send a patrol immediately. 13 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the gray rain. 2 Detroit PD officers arrived, Lieutenant Raymond Keller, a grizzled man with a weary face, and young Officer Monroe, tall and lanky with a still youthful expression. They approached the silver sedan, shining flashlights inside, exchanging brief words in the clipped tones of those accustomed to nights like this. "Doors locked, windows intact," Keller said, resting a hand on the wet hood. No signs of a struggle. He pulled a leather notebook from his raincoat, jotting down details. From the police car's recorder, Janice's voice crackled, breaking as she recounted the last night her sister left the factory. She repeated every detail. Angela clocked out at 9:20, called to say, "Sis, go to bed early," then vanished. She had no boyfriend, no debts, no enemies. Monroe listened, scribbling in neat, deliberate handwriting. A cold gust swept through the lot, carrying wet papers, and Keller closed his notebook, scanning the area. The sodium streetlight cast a glow, reflecting off the slick concrete. "You're right," he said grimly. "No one leaves their car in this weather and walks off." By 11 p.m., the area was cordoned off. 2 yellow tape lines surrounded the car, and technicians snapped photos from every angle. Under the pooled water, fresh tire tracks, and a small women's size 7 shoe print, angled toward the gate, emerged. No skid marks, no drag marks. Keller swept his flashlight, noting no sign of struggle, environment consistent with departure on foot or voluntary accompaniment. He checked the camera on the factory wall, its cable cut, lens fogged with white mist. "Damn it," he muttered. "How long's this been broken?" The security guard replied. 2 weeks. "No one's fixed it." Keller sighed, directing Monroe to check the gas station camera across the street, where neon lights flickered onto the oily road. In the car, Janice sat motionless, her raincoat clinging to her, eyes red as she stared into the darkness. When Keller approached, she opened the door, voice hoarse. "What do you think happened to my sister?" Keller paused, then said, "It's too early to say, ma'am. Most voluntary disappearances resolve in a day or two." Janice gave a short, humorless laugh, raspy, and choked. "Angela's not that kind of person. She wouldn't go anywhere without telling me." Keller didn't respond, only watched the rain streak down the car's windshield. He knew voluntary disappearance was the cheapest comfort a cop could offer in a case without a body. By midnight, the lot was left to the sound of rain on tin. They collected soil samples from the tires, lifted fingerprints from the door handle, and towed the car to the evidence yard. At the station, Keller sat at his computer, typing, "Missing person, Wade, Angela M. 32, last seen 9:20 p.m., Marshall and Gray Textile. Possible voluntary disappearance." The morning after the case was logged, the Marshall and Gray factory parking lot became an official crime scene. Police extended the yellow tape, forensic vans lined up, and steam from their exhausts rose in Detroit's relentless drizzle. Lieutenant Keller stood among the equipment, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He received orders to expand the search around Jefferson Avenue, near the Rouge River, where Angela's phone last pinged. "We search a 2-mile radius," Keller told the team, voice rough. "From the lot to Fort Street, then along the riverbank. She could be injured or left somewhere." Janice Wade stayed at the scene, clad in a long raincoat, standing by the temporary barricade, her eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. She clutched a photo of Angela, a gentle smile blurred by water on the frame. "Don't let them think my sister just walked away," she told a young officer. "She's not like that." The officer nodded silently, resting a hand on her shoulder before turning away. On the first day, 5 K9 units were deployed. The dogs sniffed around the factory, along Jefferson Avenue, and down a dirt path to the Rouge River. Each time a dog paused to bark, Keller jotted notes and marked the spot. But the trail led only to stagnant puddles, industrial debris, and old oil stains. No blood, no personal items. The chemical stench from a nearby dye plant overwhelmed everything else. A technician muttered, "Finding a human scent here is like looking for a needle in a junkyard." On the second day, the search expanded to an old residential area. The Detroit PD deployed a drone, a new technology at the time, faltering in the rain and smoke. Its feed showed dilapidated rooftops, sprawling scrapyards, and rusted train tracks weaving through weeds. "If there's a body, it could have been swept into the river," a forensic specialist said, eyes fixed on a map. Keller glanced at him, said nothing, and signaled the dive team. Divers began scouring the Rouge River that afternoon. The water was murky, sluggish, and choked with industrial waste. Rusted barrels and metal scraps surfaced from the muddy bottom like relics of a forgotten era. Keller stood on the bridge, watching black-clad figures bob in the gray water. He'd led many missing persons cases, but none weighed on him like this. Perhaps it was Janice's eyes, tracking every movement in the river, as if she believed her sister was still out there, waiting to be found with enough effort. That evening, local news reported, "Factory worker vanishes during Detroit night shift." The clip showed the cordoned-off lot, police cars reflecting the rain-soaked lights. The anchor's voice was steady. "Angela Wade, 32, missing since Wednesday night, remains unfound. Police have not ruled out foul play." Detroit viewers listened and forgot quickly, accustomed to such stories. But in a cafe near the factory, a few workers exchanged glances, whispering, "She was kind, never messed with anyone. Who'd want to hurt her?" On the third day, Keller was joined by 2 agents from the Regional Investigation Unit. They reviewed criminal records around Marshall and Gray, no violent priors, no unusual reports. They checked silver Chevrolets in the area. 37 vehicles, none with matching plates or suspicious traces. An eerie silence enveloped the case. Every lead stalled. Every clue dead-ended. That afternoon, the rain eased. Searchers walked the riverbank, where faint sunlight caught oil slicks in grim rainbows. A local student volunteer found a women's sneaker tangled in the grass, soaked through. Janice rushed over, hands shaking as she looked at it. But the next day's DNA test confirmed it wasn't Angela's. A fleeting hope was crushed in hours. On the third night, Keller sat in his office, walls plastered with maps and photos. Red pins marked every location: the lot, the Rouge Bridge, the gas station, an abandoned motel. He reread the report. No physical evidence recovered, no witness confirmation, no sign of struggle. Each line was a void, an unanswered question. He studied Angela's photo, a plain face, unremarkable, hinting at no tragedy. But that ordinariness made her disappearance haunting. A person could vanish completely from Detroit, leaving nothing behind. Outside, fog cloaked the Rouge River. The search team thinned, leaving only a few officers on the bridge, talking quietly under weak orange lights. Janice sat in her car, staring through the fogged windshield, hands gripping her phone, as if expecting a call from her sister. When Keller approached, she asked, "Will they keep going?" He nodded, "We'll keep going until we have answers." But he knew time was running out. After 3 days, a missing person case was no longer urgent. On the fourth morning, with the search yielding nothing, Keller and Monroe returned to the scene to re-examine every detail. The Marshall and Gray factory remained steeped in a heavy atmosphere. Morning shift workers passed the lot silently, avoiding police gazes. They were used to missing person reports, but this was different. The missing was one of their own. Keller sat in the guard's office, a cramped room, reeking of stale smoke and old coffee, listening to the night guard's statement. Darius Hill, in his 50s, had worked at the factory for nearly 20 years, his face etched with exhaustion and eyes sunken from lack of sleep. "That night, I saw her, Angela, at 9:25. Someone was waiting at the edge of the lot," Hill said, voice rough, fingering an unlit cigarette. A tall man in a gray jacket, leaning on a silver Chevrolet, headlights dim. "I thought it was her friend, so I didn't pay much mind. They talked for a few minutes, then I went back to the desk." "Did you hear them argue, or see anything unusual?" Monroe asked. Hill shook his head, sighing. "No," she smiled, like she knew him. "When I heard she was missing the next morning, I couldn't believe it." Keller scribbled, "Last witness, Darius Hill, observed Angela Wade, with unknown male, near silver Chevrolet, 9:25 p.m. He looked up. "You're sure it was a Chevrolet?" Hill nodded. "I've driven one. The shape, taillights, unmistakable." Keller and Monroe stepped outside, staring at the still damp lot. "If he's right, Angela left with someone she trusted," Keller said. Monroe nodded. "Which means they knew her schedule." They checked the camera at Jefferson Gas and Mart across from the factory. The owner, Yusuf, an Arab man, pulled a dusty stack of VHS tapes from storage. "I keep them for 2 weeks before erasing," he said, loading a tape. The flickering screen showed cars passing in the rain, streetlights casting trembling reflections. At 9:26, a frame flashed, a silver Chevrolet crawled through, headlights glinting on the wet road. The driver was a shadowy blur. "Can you zoom in on the plate?" Monroe asked. Yusuf shook his head. "Old machine, blurry image." "Look, you can only make out the first 2 characters, 4B. The rest is a mess." Keller squinted at the screen, his face catching the white glow. 4B, over 3,000 cars in Wayne County start like that, he murmured. But he noted details, a scratch on the rear bumper, left corner, distinct enough to remember. He snapped a photo with his phone and thanked Yusuf. Back at the station, Keller requested image analysis to clarify the plate. They enhanced brightness and reduced noise, but only got 3 characters, 4BN. The rest was useless. Monroe tossed his pen on the desk, exhaling, not enough to track anyone. Keller sat quietly, studying a map on the screen. A red circle marked the factory, arrows tracing vehicle routes that night. One silver Chevrolet, unregistered for factory business, matched the camera footage. He tapped his fingers. Someone who knew her shift, knew her route. They reviewed residents in Angela's Melville neighborhood. Property records showed John Anderson, 38, a mechanic 4 houses down, owned a 2001 silver Chevrolet Impala. Monroe scanned his file. No priors, single, ex-Navy, quit his garage job last month. Keller nodded, jotting possible connection. The first interview with John Anderson took place Monday morning in a small Detroit PD room. Fluorescent light bounced off his calm face. Keller sat across, tapping the cold steel table. Anderson wore a gray shirt, wrists smudged with machine oil, a faint metallic scent clinging to him, a mechanic's trademark. Keller asked repeatedly, varying his tone, "Where did you meet Angela Wade on the night of April 12th? Anderson's reply never wavered. "I ran into her after her shift. I stopped. We talked a bit. Then I left." Keller leaned in. "Talked about what?" Anderson shrugged. "Small stuff. I asked if she was still at the factory. She said she was tired, wanted to get home. I got in my car and drove off." Keller noted, voice flat. "What time did you get home?" "Around 9:30-10. Watched the Tigers-White Sox game. I can recap every play if you want." His answers were smooth, almost too perfect. When Keller paused the recording, Monroe brought in the Impala's forensic report. No blood, no foreign prints, no hairs, but Anderson's. The driver's seat had new upholstery, replaced a week earlier, Anderson claimed. "Did you know she was missing?" Keller asked before ending the session. Anderson replied softly, "I heard and I'm sorry for her, but I'm not involved." Keller watched him leave, walking calmly, raincoat over his shoulder. Outside, the drizzle persisted. "Too smooth," Monroe muttered. Keller nodded, eyes fixed. "Smart liars don't slip. At least not at first." 2 days later, video analysis confirmed the silver Chevrolet's driver resembled Anderson's build, but the image was too poor to identify a face. The plate, still just 4BN, wasn't enough for a broader search warrant or charges. All evidence hung like faint smoke in the air. Keller tried another angle, canvassing Angela's neighborhood. Neighbors recalled Anderson stopping by, fixing small things. An elderly woman said, "He helped with a light bulb, lent Angela a ladder." They seemed friendly, but no one saw them together regularly. No one noticed anything odd the night Angela vanished. In Detroit, people were used to hearing no screams, even when horror unfolded next door. 3 weeks passed. Media calls dwindled. The factory worker missing after night shift story sank to the bottom of news cycles. Other cases, robberies, fires, took over headlines. Keller reviewed the file daily, adding notes, then stashed it in his desk. Without physical evidence, witnesses, or a motive, he was stuck. April 12th remained a blurry gap in the camera's data. No light, no sound. The Wade family kept searching, though hope faded daily. Janice printed new posters, plastering them from Jefferson Avenue to the Fort Street gas station. Angela's photo smiled faintly, captioned, "Missing since April 12, 2006. Contact with any information." She knocked on doors, taped up flyers, until postal workers knew her by sight, and asked no questions. But rain battered the posters, corners peeled, ink bled. No one read them anymore. They became fading relics of a case dying in silence. One late weekend afternoon, Keller visited a cafe near the Rouge River. He saw Janice in a corner, holding a cold coffee, eyes lost. "They say this case will go cold," she said hoarsely. "I know what that means." Keller stared out the window at the new rain, silent. He knew the system's indifference. A missing person without a body was just a number. "We're still working," he said, though he knew it was a lie. Back at the station, Angela Wade's file sat on his desk, a quiet reminder. The first page, marked status pending, had yellowed. He folded it, filed it under cold case, among hundreds of others. Each file held a few pages, photos, brief descriptions, a paper graveyard for lives, swallowed by the city, never mentioned again. 90 days after Angela Wade vanished, Detroit's summer came and went with dry winds and the acrid smell of factory smoke. At the station, the file labeled Wade, Angela M. grew by a few pages, meaningless notes. No new evidence, no additional witnesses, no suspect contact. Keller read it one last time, then clipped a red cover to the corner, status cold case. A round red stamp, pressed down, a silent sentence for an unresolved case. The Wayne County Cold Case Unit, in a musty basement on Beaubien Street, smelled of mold and decaying paper, a familiar scent of failure. Each iron cabinet held hundreds of interrupted lives, missing persons, unidentified bodies, faces no one recognized. Keller carried Angela's file downstairs, placing it among the rows, labeled Missing Person, 2006, Detroit Southwest District. Inside were sealed evidence bags, her photo, a cloth glove, phone records, and a blurry gas station camera print. Each item was a silent testament to futility, not enough to convict, but too much to discard. A technician logged it, scribbling indefinite storage. Keller watched, silent. He knew indefinite meant never touched again. He left the basement, the iron door clanging shut behind him, sealing a forgotten realm. Above, the city moved on. In those 3 months, Detroit saw 12 more missing persons cases, mostly young women, workers, the unnoticed. The media chased new stories: a warehouse fire, an East Side riot, a politician's scandal. Angela Wade's name lingered only in PD's internal list, line 118, missing person, no further development. Keller sat in his office, a cold coffee cup untouched for hours. He looked at the bulletin board, where photos of missing persons were slowly replaced by new cases. In the corner, Angela's poster curled at the edges, its ink blurred and yellowed. He couldn't bring himself to take it down, but there was no reason to keep it up either. Another dead end, Monroe said, stepping in with a new file. A woman missing from the East Side, circumstances eerily similar to Angela's. Keller nodded faintly, his voice low. In this city, people vanish easier than they're found. In September, the investigation team officially closed the report. Janice received a letter from the police, no evidence of foul play. The case will be archived for review if new evidence emerges. She read the line repeatedly, feeling as if someone was burying her sister a second time. No evidence of foul play, meaning no one was accountable, no one was to blame, only that Angela had dissolved into a void. In the days that followed, Janice still visited the Marshall and Gray factory, standing at the gate, staring at the lot now overgrown with weeds. A few old workers recognized her, nodded, but hurried past. No one wanted to revisit the past. The last posters fell with the autumn rain, their paper clinging to walls, words smeared into gray streaks. She peeled one off, folded it, and tucked it into her wallet, holding on to a final piece of memory. At the station, Keller took on a new case: an armed robbery in Midtown. He was busy again with late nights, reports, and crime scenes, and Angela Wade's name faded to a faint shadow in his memory. Each time he passed the cold case basement, an uneasy feeling stirred, as if someone in those thousands of files was still waiting to be found. But Detroit had no room for dreamers. The city only kept what could be proven with blood, bullet casings, or confessions. Stories with only silence were swallowed without a sound. One late year afternoon, Keller received a small letter with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note: "You stopped too soon." She never left the city. The scrawled words were unsigned. He read it over and over, then folded it into his drawer. In his mind, the rainy parking lot flickered, the silver Chevrolet's headlights flashing, Angela turning with a smile. Maybe, like every other case, he'd forget it. But as he left the office, the distant sound of rain on tin roofs echoed, a cold rhythm of time. From then on, the Wade, Angela M. file sat quietly in a Wayne County steel cabinet, alongside dozens of others, missing people, leaving nothing but a few notes. Each year, during evidence inventory, a technician opened the cabinet, glanced at the faded label, and closed it again. Out there, Detroit roared with cars, train horns, and weaving machines. And no one remembered a woman who vanished just blocks away. Buried not underground, but in the city's own cold memory. Time passed, like fine dust settling thickly over everything. The Wade, Angela M. file, and the memories of those who once spoke her name. Detroit moved through 2006-2020 with the slow decay of a city once proud of steel and engines. The Marshall and Gray factory was demolished in 2010. The lot where Angela vanished was now just a crumbling brick wall, covered in graffiti and knee-high weeds. On that ground, no one recalled a woman disappearing in the rain under silver headlights. As the southwest industrial area emptied, nearby neighborhoods thinned out too. Shops, gas stations, and diners shuttered, leaving torn signs and dusty windows. Detroit's decline was quiet. Roofs, streets, and lives fading silently. In the city's downward slide, Angela Wade's disappearance was just a minor line in an old report. The Wade family unraveled as Detroit did. After 2 years of waiting, Angela's mother died of heart failure. Janice sold their Melville apartment, moving to Grand Rapids with a relative. Each fall, she sent a letter to the Detroit Police Department, always starting, "I just want to know if there's any new information about my sister." The reply never changed. No new information. In the Wayne County Archive, the Wade file sat untouched in its steel cabinet. During annual inventories, a technician checked the evidence code, signed unchanged, and moved on. The nylon bags, holding a silver bracelet, cloth glove, and blurry photo print remained sealed, yellowing with time. The red cold case stamp stayed as vivid as day one, likely because no one touched it. Keller retired in 2013. At his send-off, Monroe teased, "Still not letting go of the Angela case?" Keller gave a tired smile. "Every cop has a case that keeps them up," he said. "For me, it's that girl." Months later, he moved to a quiet suburb, cutting ties with the PD. Monroe, promoted, moved to another district's investigation team. The last person who remembered Angela was gone from the system. Janice kept her routine, yearly letters, and occasional Detroit visits. She drove past the old factory site, stopping where the lot once was, now just a cracked concrete slab and a collapsed wall. She laid down a small bouquet, lingering as if hoping for the impossible, that her sister would step out, smile, and say she'd been gone too long. But only the wind blew through, carrying rust and coal smoke from the Rouge River. New residents in the area knew nothing of the old disappearance. To them, it was just cheap, empty land, avoided because at night you hear things underground. Rumors spread. The old factory was haunted. Someone died there. No names were mentioned, but during rainy seasons, some swore they saw a woman in a blue worker's coat by the fence, face turned away, vanishing into the fog. In the cold case office in the PD's basement, fluorescent lights cast a glow over metal file cabinets. A young technician, Harper, was tasked with reviewing old missing persons cases. She opened a drawer, pulling out a thin box labeled 2006, Wade, Angela M. Flipping through, dust rose with a musty smell. "Just a few pages," she murmured to a colleague. "And nothing new in 14 years, he replied, not looking up from his keyboard. "Note it and close it. That's procedure." Harper carefully added a line to the inventory log. No new information, no additional leads. She returned the box, shut the cabinet, and the metallic clang echoed in the frigid room. Outside, the city kept turning, with abandoned buildings, half-finished neighborhoods, and lives left untold. On TV, they spoke of Detroit's revival, new tech hubs rising amid old ruins. But no one mentioned those never found, like Angela Wade. In March 2020, cold, damp winds from the Detroit River swept through downtown, carrying metal and steam from abandoned factories. In the Detroit Police Department's basement, storing hundreds of unresolved files, a new program launched, Unresolved Victims Initiative, to review missing persons and unsolved murders from the past 2 decades. Leading the first list was Detective Lorraine Hensley, 38, from the Special Investigations Team. She approached the task with the weight of someone who'd seen too many victims erased by time and bureaucracy. Hensley arrived at the cold case office on a gloomy Monday morning. The room was cold, filled with the hum of a dehumidifier and pale fluorescent light. Harper, the young technician who'd logged no new information the previous year, handed her a stack of dusty cardboard boxes labeled 2000, 2009. Among them was a thin, faded brown file, edges yellowed, Wade, Angela M., missing 2006. Harper flipped through and said softly, "Nothing notable here. It's been closed forever." Lorraine smiled, tucking the file into her bag, and replied quietly, "Sometimes the notable stuff is in the cases no one wants to remember." That afternoon, alone in her office, she switched on a desk lamp and read every page. The opening line of the first report stopped her. Missing person report. Wade, Angela M., 32, Marshall and Gray worker, vanished April 12, 2006. Keller and Monroe's notes from 14 years ago were still sharp, laced with the smell of old ink. Lorraine pictured the scene, a woman leaving the factory, drizzle falling, headlights flashing, then gone. She set the report down, eyes landing on the evidence inventory. Below, handbag, tested, phone, no data, cloth glove, insufficient sample. She spotted a handwritten note at the bottom. Silver bracelet, found at scene, sealed hash, AW0617, untested. Lorraine frowned. She checked the attached file and saw a photo of a delicate silver bracelet engraved with AW inside. Per the report, it was found under the victim's car that night, but wasn't analyzed due to no blood or criminal evidence. In 2006, DNA tech was rudimentary. Trace samples were nearly useless. But in 2020, with forensic genealogy and microparticle analysis, things had changed. Lorraine closed the file, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. 14 years, she whispered. Maybe it's the only thing left untouched. She headed straight to the Wayne County Evidence Vault. The long room, lined with metal cabinets, smelled of plastic and iron. The keeper, an old man named Murphy, peered over thick glasses. "What are you looking for?" "File AW0617, she replied. He checked the log, tapped the computer, and disappeared into the rows. Minutes later, he returned with a sealed gray box, label intact. "No one's touched it since 2006, he said. "Careful, it's got time's dust on it." Lorraine gloved up and opened the box. Inside was a clear nylon bag with the silver bracelet, tarnished, wrapped in brittle brown paper. She held it to the light, its faint reflection cold. A smudged mark, like a faded fingerprint or stain, marred the surface. "This'll do," she said softly, almost to herself. She signed the transfer papers, noting request trace DNA and genealogical analysis, Detroit PD, April 2020. The next day, the sample went to Great Lakes Forensic Lab in Lansing. Technicians confirmed they could extract DNA from residual skin cells, something unthinkable 15 years earlier. Lorraine signed the forms, returned to her office, and sat with the Wade file open before her. In the quiet, the rain outside echoed the night Angela vanished. She reviewed witness statements, night guard, neighbors, co-workers, all based on memory, no physical proof. Everything stopped there. If the bracelet's DNA isn't Angela's, she thought, it could belong to the last person who touched her. The idea sent a chill through her. 3 weeks after sending the sample, Lorraine got the call she'd waited for daily. A gray Detroit morning, fog on the windows, and she was sipping cold coffee when the desk phone rang. "Detective Hensley? Callum from Great Lakes Lab. We have results on the bracelet." Her grip tightened, heart skipping. "Go ahead." Callum hesitated, then spoke slowly, as if weighing each word. "The skin cell traces weren't enough for a full profile. But we found a fine hair caught in the silver seam. Nuclear DNA analysis shows it's male, not female." Lorraine held her breath. "So, not Angela's." "Correct. And it's entirely distinct from her profile in the system." She stood, a mix of excitement and unease. For 14 years, no one considered it a missing woman's bracelet bearing a man's DNA. Did you run it through CODIS? Yes, no matches nationwide. But, Callum paused, shifting tone. We sent it to Parabon Nanolabs for genealogical tracing. Preliminary results came back this morning. You should see them yourself. Lorraine drove to Lansing through a windy noon, carrying a restless mix of hope and dread. In the gleaming lab, Callum spread a genealogical map across a screen, hundreds of glowing dots linked by green threads. At the top, a label, predicted familial cluster, Anderson. Lorraine read the name aloud, voice low. Anderson. A silence settled over the room. That name, in the Wade file, had been mentioned and dismissed as a dead end. John Anderson, the neighbor questioned and released, for lack of evidence. Lorraine opened her laptop, pulling up Keller's old notes. Anderson, John E., 34. Whitmore Auto Garage, claimed to leave home at 9:45 p.m., confirmed meeting Angela at the lot, then talked briefly and left. The report added, no fingerprints, no other witnesses, no basis for charges. The file closed in under 2 weeks. Lorraine looked at Callum. You're sure about the familial match? Sure enough to bet my paycheck. The DNA has at least 2 distant relative matches, one in Dearborn Heights, Anderson's surname, and one in Monroe County, same genetic branch. Keep digging, and you'll find the root. Driving back to Detroit, she passed streets Angela once walked. Drizzle blurred the windshield, each sign and corner holding the past's breath. Anderson. The name was no longer a dead end, but a door cracking open in a maze. That evening, Lorraine sat in her office, the Wade file spread out with fresh Parabon documents. She traced John Anderson's history. Per 2006 PD records, he lived in apartment 42, 3 units from Angela's. No priors. After the investigation, he left Detroit in 2007, leaving no forwarding address. She checked the DMV and found a Robert Anderson, 54, living in Dearborn Heights, 15 miles from Detroit. Parabon confirmed Robert as a second-degree relative to the bracelet's DNA, likely a sibling or direct descendant. Lorraine leaned back, rubbing her forehead. If Robert was related to the DNA, the man who touched Angela that night could be John Anderson or someone in his lineage. She jotted in her notebook, next step, locate John Anderson's whereabouts and history. Cross-check familial DNA. The next day, she visited the old records room. Harper helped retrieve 2006 scene photos. In one blurry image, Lorraine spotted a man standing far off by a metal fence, in a dark raincoat. A note below, identified as John Anderson, unrelated. She zoomed in. His face was obscured by rain. But his eyes, or maybe an illusion, seemed to stare coldly at the camera, defiant. She tapped the desk, thoughts swirling. If Anderson was involved, why wasn't his DNA in CODIS? Maybe he was never arrested. Or dead before the system matured. Either way, Parabon had retraced the case's faint path, leading back to southwest Detroit, where Angela stepped into the rainy lot. Lorraine drove to Dearborn Heights one late afternoon. The quiet suburb had neat red brick homes, manicured lawns. She parked at 2156, Robert Anderson's registered address. A silver-haired wiry man answered. I'm Detective Hensley, Detroit PD, she said. Voice calm but firm. I need to ask about your relative, John E. Anderson. Robert stared, a flicker of wariness in his eyes. John was my cousin, he said slowly. But he's gone, long gone, gone, Lorraine pressed. Around 2009, car accident, in Ohio. He paused, then added. He lived in southwest Detroit, by the old factories. One day, he said he was leaving, never coming back. Lorraine scribbled silently. When she asked if John knew anyone named Angela Wade, Robert looked down, lips tight for a long moment. I remember him mentioning a girl from the factory. Nice, dark hair, always smiling. He said she knew too much. I didn't ask more. His words hung heavy in the room. Lorraine thanked him, and left. But at her car, her hands trembled slightly. A vague instinct rose that the 2009 accident might not have ended everything. That night, back in Detroit, she reopened the Wade file. The desk lamp cast yellow light on the pages where suspect John Anderson, cleared, was now crossed out in red. Below, Lorraine wrote 3 bold words: "Open investigation." Lorraine returned to the cold case office near midnight, rain lashing the windows in long streaks. On her desk, the Wade file was no longer dusty papers, but the focus of a special investigations team. She gathered 3 others: Harper on data, Ramirez on GPS, and Parker, a traffic imaging engineer, to reconstruct April 12, 2006, the night Angela Wade vanished in Detroit. "What do we know?" Lorraine asked, voice hoarse from sleeplessness. Harper flipped open a fresh report. Marshall and Gray factory security camera caught Angela leaving the gate at 9:20 p.m. Heading to the south lot. A silver Chevrolet parked nearby, headlights on for 3 seconds, then off. No clear plate, just a white decal on the rear bumper. Lorraine nodded. "Go on." Ramirez opened a laptop with a GPS map. Angela's phone data shut off at 9:28 p.m. But before that, it pinged 3 cell towers. From the factory, the signal moved southwest along Jefferson Avenue, stopping near an abandoned industrial zone by the Rouge River. That area, in 2006, was still used for old cargo checks. Now it's empty. Lorraine leaned back, eyes on the map. A red signal line twisted like a vein through the city's body, ending in a dark gray patch, once a heavy metal storage site. "So she never left Detroit," she said softly. "She vanished right in its heart." Parker projected old city traffic camera footage, restored with brightening software. The blurry screen showed a silver Chevrolet on Jefferson at 9:33 p.m., matching the phone's final ping direction. "I cross-referenced with the map. The car loses signal at the old industrial bridge. No cameras worked there after 2008, Parker said. And here," he pointed. "Another vehicle appears 30 seconds later. Looks like a factory security truck. But it didn't stop, just passed through." Lorraine stared, then said, "Zoom in on the Chevrolet's plate." "Not clear enough. But I can recover the end." Parker worked fast, the grainy image revealing a faint string, 4K7. Harper checked Michigan's 2006 vehicle registry. Only 2 matched the prefix, one from a defunct transport company, the other, Johnny Anderson. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Lorraine stared at the glowing data on the screen, then nodded slightly. "No doubt about it," he took her. The team began reconstructing the entire timeline. 9:20 p.m., Angela left the factory gate. 9:25, the silver Chevrolet appeared. 9:28, her phone went offline. 9:33, traffic cameras caught the car, leaving Jefferson Avenue, heading toward the industrial zone by the river. 9:45, heavy rain began, temperatures dropped. No more footage, no signals. After that, nothing. Ramirez opened a 3D map, projecting it onto a large screen. If the car stopped in the Rouge industrial zone, there were only 3 access points, all side roads. One led straight to the highway, but no cameras caught it leaving. That means the car was either hidden or the driver left on foot. Lorraine tapped her pen on the table. "And if Angela was in the car, she never left the city." Harper said softly, "We can narrow the area using weather and terrain analysis." She pulled up 2006 satellite imagery, gray and blurry from NASA data. That night had light rain. The industrial zone's ground was wet, but only the western metal yard flooded. That's where the abandoned storage sheds are. Lorraine closed her eyes, picturing it. Angela, the 32-year-old worker, in the car with someone familiar, rain streaking the windows, headlights flashing one last time before fading. No one heard anything but distant thunder. One wrong choice, and a life vanished in 10 minutes. Parker looked up. "If Anderson took her there, we might find traces. That ground hasn't been touched since 2010. I can request a survey permit." Lorraine nodded, voice low. "Do it, and call forensics. We're digging up Detroit again." 2 days later, The team stood at the Rouge River's edge. The old industrial zone was a wasteland, crumbling brick walls, rusted fences, tall reeds swaying. The only sounds were the river lapping the shore and wind whistling through hollow iron frames. Beneath the mud, something might still remain, untouched by time. Lorraine, in a raincoat, pointed, "Lot B3, that's the last GPS ping." Forensics began metal detection and ground scans. The scanner's screen showed faint blips, mostly scrap metal, bottle caps, animal bones. But at over a meter deep, the signal spiked, a wave curve rose sharply. Harper looked at Lorraine. "Something's down there." She crouched, eyes glued to the screen. "Keep going," she said quietly. As the sun set, rain fell again. In the dim yellow light, the team stood silently around a freshly dug pit, the scanner beeping steadily. No one said it, but they all knew. April 12, 2006, had never ended. On the drive back, Lorraine studied the map, the red signal line halting in the city's dark void. She murmured, as if to herself, "She didn't go anywhere. Angela's still here. We just need to find the right place." On the morning of October 12, 2020, Detroit remained cloaked in gray fog and industrial smoke. In the cold case unit office, Lorraine Hensley placed the thick file on the chief investigator's desk. The cover read, "Wade Angela M. Reopened 2020 now with an addendum. Suspect, John E. Anderson. Residence, Dearborn Heights, Michigan," she said curtly. "I want a warrant to search Anderson's old house." The chief raised an eyebrow. "He's been dead over a decade, Lorraine." "What are we digging up?" she replied without hesitation. "Not him, what he left behind." That afternoon, the Detroit Police Department, with Wayne County Court, filed for a search warrant for 2156 Lincoln Avenue, where Robert Anderson, the suspect's relative, lived. Based on bracelet DNA and genealogical results, the court approved a search warrant, property of deceased individual John E. Anderson, possible evidence related to homicide missing person case. At 6:30 the next morning, police vehicles left the PD headquarters, dawn breaking in a thin streak after a rainy night. Lorraine sat in the back, eyes fixed through the window, clutching the file on her lap. She'd executed dozens of warrants, but this felt different, like stepping backward through time into a sealed past. In Dearborn Heights, the neighborhood was still asleep. The red brick house at 2156 stood quiet. Recently renovated, neatly trimmed lawn, new wooden door, white curtains drawn. Robert Anderson opened the door, face tense but compliant. "I knew you'd come back," he said, voice shaky. Lorraine showed the warrant, speaking calmly but firmly. "We're just following procedure. No one's accused until we have results." The forensic team spread out. Two searched the ground floor, another group swept the garage, while Lorraine and Harper descended to the basement, where Robert said, "No one's cleaned since John died." The old wooden stairs creaked, a thick smell of mold and rust rising. A dim ceiling bulb cast light on dusty cardboard boxes, rusted metal tools, and a cracked wooden cabinet. Harper swept her flashlight. "He could have hidden something here." Lorraine nodded, tracing the walls. The northeast corner's bricks looked off, newer mortar than the rest. She tapped with a steel pick, hearing a hollow echo. "Here," she said. They pulled aside an old wooden plank, revealing a square sealed with mortar. A few hammer strikes broke it open, exposing a small, dusty metal box the size of a briefcase, webbed with cobwebs. Lorraine gloved up, lifting it carefully. The rusted lock gave way with a pry bar's snap. They held their breath. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, identical to the tested one, save a small scratch near the clasp. Next to it, 3 yellowed Polaroids showed a woman in a worker's uniform, face half turned. Angela Wade. The last was blurriest, showing only dark hair and an arm with a bracelet. At the bottom, a small plastic bag held a few long black hairs, tied with an old rubber band. Lorraine's skin prickled. Harper whispered, "My God, who keeps this?" Lorraine's voice chilled. "Someone who didn't want to forget, or didn't want to be found." Everything was photographed, sealed, labeled as evidence. Lorraine signed the report, then scanned the basement. On a wooden panel, someone had carved with a rusty nail, April 12th, rain. She read it silently, her breath catching. That afternoon, Great Lakes Forensics received the new samples. Lorraine stood in the observation room, watching through glass as a technician placed the hairs on a tray. The DNA extraction was slow, droplets falling under white light. 3 hours later, Callum, the technician who'd called about the bracelet, entered with results. "We have a full match," he said. "These hairs are a 100% match to Angela Wade's DNA from the 2006 file." Lorraine stood still, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She took the report, eyes scanning the bolded match confirmed. Wade, Angela M. Each word like a nail driven in. Harper, beside her, exhaled. So she was there, in Anderson's house. Lorraine didn't reply, staring at the enlarged Polaroid on the screen. Angela's faint smile, unaware of what lay behind the lens. "She never left Detroit," Lorraine said slowly. "He brought her here, hid her, and people lived next to a secret's grave for 14 years. That evening, forensics returned to Anderson's house for further checks. They found a chilling detail under an old rug in the basement. The wooden floor had a square patch with mismatched nails, faint traces of cleaning chemicals lingering. They drilled wood samples for luminol testing. Results showed faint blue-green streaks, human blood, wiped clean. Monday morning, the Detroit PD forensic team returned to Anderson's house with a new mission: vehicle analysis. In the garage behind the red brick house, a 2004 silver Chevrolet sat under a faded green tarp, gathering dust. Robert Anderson, John's relative, said it still ran, and was John's, kept for sentimental reasons. As technicians lifted the tarp, he stood silently on the porch, face pale. Lorraine gave a slight nod, signaling forensics to begin. The Chevrolet looked unremarkable: peeling silver paint, cracked rear window, flat tires, but Lorraine knew the most harmless things could hide the past. Harper opened the trunk, a cold waft of oil and staleness rising. "Nothing obvious," she said. Lorraine crossed her arms, eyes sharp. "Bring in the luminol." 2 technicians, masked, dimmed the garage lights. Blue chemical spray coated the steel surfaces. The room plunged into darkness, only the patter of rain on the tin roof. Then faint blue-green specks flared like a ghost breathing. Tiny glowing dots traced a long, thin smear in the trunk, like a hand swipe. Harper caught her breath. "My God, that's blood." Lorraine crouched, staring at the flickering glow on cold steel. "Record it," she said. "Sample every spot." Technicians carefully swabbed each glowing mark, sealing them in vials. Under the trunk's peeling liner, they found an old stain someone had cleaned, but not thoroughly. The garage fell silent. Lorraine stood still for a long moment. Each luminol speck was a piece of truth, pieces no one sought for 14 years. She said softly, "He hid her here before moving her. Angela was in this car." That afternoon, the car was towed to Detroit PD's Forensic Center. The lab buzzed like a hive. Camera whirs, floodlights, laser scanners, blending into a stark rhythm of truth, unfolding. Callum, who'd handled the bracelet DNA, oversaw the process. He reported to Lorraine, "We found human hemoglobin proteins in the glowing traces. Though minimal, the structure fully matches Angela Wade's DNA." He looked up, eyes grave. "No question. She was injured in this trunk. Or worse." Lorraine said nothing, pulling a chair to sit, staring at the scanner's printed results. Below the DNA graph, a cold conclusion read, "DNA sample recovered from trunk interior. Positive match." From here, the missing person case was no longer just a woman vanished. It was now a suspected homicide. That evening, in the Detroit Police Department's meeting room, the team presented their findings. Harper opened a city map, pointing to 2 glowing dots. "Here's the Marshall and Gray factory, where Angela left. And here, the Rouge River zone, the last phone signal. Mud on the Chevrolet's tires, matches samples from the river site. Chemical composition is near perfect." Lorraine asked, "What's the match percentage?" 98, Harper replied. She nodded. So after Angela vanished, the car went to the Rouge Industrial Zone, then returned. That same night, Ramirez, the GPS specialist, added, "We also found fine sand with iron oxide, unique to the scrapyard by the river. It matches the phone signal's estimated path." The room grew heavy. Lorraine stood, pacing slowly, neon light casting her shadow long across the floor. Every piece points one way. Angela was attacked or incapacitated at the factory, put in the Chevrolet driven to the Rouge River Zone, and there, all traces stop. Anderson returned, parked the car, cleaned the trunk, and hid everything. She paused, voice lowering. "We're not looking for a missing person anymore. We're investigating a murder." The next morning, forensics continued scrutinizing details. Removing the rear right tire, they found dried mud and reed fibers caught in the tread. Microscopic analysis showed soil grains high in manganese and sulfur, matching the Rouge River's 2006 sediment from old steel plant runoff. A report addendum noted, "Vehicle associated with Rouge River site." Lorraine read the final report, fingers tracing the words. Every clue now formed a closed chain. The silver bracelet, the basement, the trunk's blood, the river soil, all led to one hand, John Anderson. That evening, as the team left, Lorraine stayed in the dim office. The desk lamp lit Angela's Polaroid. She studied the faint smile, then said softly, "You never left Detroit, did you?" Neither could he escape his guilt. Outside rain fell, a cold October rain, like that night, years ago. She stepped onto the balcony, lit a cigarette, and watched the distant Rouge River lights flicker. Somewhere in that darkness, a bone fragment, a scrap of cloth, or a trace of memory might still remain. The next day, the Wade file was officially reclassified. Case number 06-127 in the PD system shifted from missing person, cold case, to suspected homicide, active investigation. In the report's notes, Lorraine added a final line. "Based on forensic evidence, we conclude Angela M. Wade was injured or deceased during the night of April 12, 2006. Primary suspect, John E. Anderson. Case remains active for recovery of body and corroborating evidence." Harper watched her sign, saying softly, "We're almost there." Lorraine nodded, eyes fixed through the fogged window. "Almost, but not enough. Until we find her, this isn't over." The week after Angela Wade's case was reclassified as suspected homicide, the cold case office became a command center. On a large board in the room's center, Lorraine Hensley used red marker to retrace the victim's final journey. Each time stamp, route, and GPS coordinate was marked with small circles linked by a web of red lines. At the center, a bold note, Rouge Industrial Zone, 9:33 p.m. to 10:21 p.m. 48 minutes, Harper read aloud, voice low. That's how long the Chevrolet stayed still. Then the signal headed back toward Dearborn Heights. Lorraine nodded. 48 minutes, enough to hide a person. Ramirez presented a detailed map, GPS from the car's old onboard diagnostics, recovered data. It left Marshall and Gray at 9:25 p.m., stopped for 48 minutes at coordinates 42.285 n,-8 3.154 in abandoned cement warehouse lot less than 300 meters from the Rouge River. He zoomed in on satellite imagery, showing a gray mottled patch amid scrap heaps and rusted tanks. Lorraine stared at the coordinates, fingers tapping lightly. That's Lot B3, right? In 2006, it was owned by Detroit Aggregate. Harper opened archive records. Correct. They went bankrupt in 2009, and the area's been abandoned since. No one goes in except urban explorers. Lorraine stood, pushing her chair back. We're going there. But first, I want to verify the evidence. She and the forensic team returned to the soil analysis lab, where Chevrolet tire samples were being compared. A technician pointed to a microscope screen. This is the soil from the rear right tire, gray clay and cement fragments. Chemical analysis shows high silicate levels, matching the industrial soil around Rouge. Harper asked, "Match percentage?" "Near perfect," the technician replied. Even has rust dust, like the metal from Lot B3's scrapyard. Lorraine stayed silent. Every piece fit like clockwork gears. She knew what they'd soon find might be the answer. Detroit hadn't dared face for 14 years. That afternoon, they secured a survey permit. By the time the team reached Lot B3, dusk had painted the sky a dull bronze. The abandoned industrial zone looked like a graveyard of steel and concrete, broken smokestacks, cracked walls, fissured ground and stagnant puddles, reflecting the fading sky. The air was thick with damp and rust. Lorraine zipped her coat, walking among shattered concrete. Across the lot, forensics began ground-penetrating radar scans along the GPS path. Harper, beside her, held the satellite map. The car stopped around here, she pointed. Possibly behind the old warehouse row near the cement mixing yard. The GPR beeped steadily, its screen showing curving geological waves. Suddenly, a wave spiked at an anomaly. The technician called out, "Object detected 0.9 meters down. Material density differs from surroundings." Lorraine leaned in. The wave covered an oval area, half a meter wide. "Mark it," she said. "Flag this as suspect point 1. As they continued, near a warehouse wall, the machine signaled again, smaller, deeper. Nearby, Harper spotted decayed fabric scraps tangled under an iron post, silvery gray, mixed with clay and cement dust. She tweezed them up, noting a dark green stitch, identical to the 2006 Marshall and Gray worker uniform. Harper's hand trembled. "Lorraine, look." She turned, eyes locking on the heavy, damp cloth. "Seal it now. This isn't random." As light faded, they paused before a wide plot marked with dozens of flag points. Yellow ribbons fluttered in the wind. The Rouge River, not far off, churned brown under an old iron bridge, its steady sound like the city's giant heartbeat. Lorraine scanned the scene, eyes catching the sunset's last glow. "He stopped here for 48 minutes, she said, voice low and deliberate. "No one else around, no cameras, no witnesses. If there was a place in Detroit quiet enough for the unthinkable, it's here." Harper asked softly, "You think the body's here?" Lorraine replied, eyes fixed on the ground. "I don't think, I know." She crouched, picking up a clump of clay. The cold, heavy grains clung to her glove. In her palm, the gray soil, laced with chemical and metal scents, matched the sample from Anderson's tire. She let it fall, making a dull thud. "We'll excavate tomorrow morning," Lorraine said. "No one leaks this location. This is a suspected homicide scene." On the morning of March 12, 2022, Detroit's sky was shrouded in thick, silvery fog. Wind from the Rouge River blew toward Dearborn Heights, carrying a biting chill and the damp smell of oil. That same morning, after 16 years, Angela Wade's missing person case entered its final phase. In the PD headquarters backlot, Lorraine Hensley reviewed the file one last time. Each page was a year of silence. DNA, clay, silver bracelet, blood traces, Polaroids, all forming a line pointing to one name. Anderson, not John, killed in a 2009 accident, but Robert Anderson, the cousin who inherited the house, living quietly in the suburbs. New findings showed Robert's DNA partially matched samples from the garage and basement, making him the only living link. She took a deep breath, glancing at the rearview mirror. Her reflection showed dark, sleepless eyes. Harper approached, adjusting Lorraine's nameplate. "Ready? I've been ready for 14 years, Lorraine replied softly. At 8:45 a.m., 3 patrol cars parked outside the red brick house on Lincoln Avenue. Police cordoned the area silently. No sirens, no megaphones. Robert Anderson was washing his car in the driveway, wearing an old jacket, silver hair fluttering in the wind. Seeing the officers, he froze, eyes blinking rapidly. Lorraine approached, long coat swaying, holding a Wayne County Court arrest warrant stamped in red. "Robert Anderson," she read loudly, voice clear through her mask. "You're under arrest for suspected first-degree murder and concealment of a body in the case of Angela Marie Wade. April 12, 2006. He stood still for seconds, hand gripping a dripping hose. Water gleamed on his pale face. Slowly, he set it down, looking at Lorraine. You say that again. Murder? Yes, Lorraine said, eyes locked on him. We have your DNA from the basement and garage scenes. The Chevrolet contains the victim's blood. It's all in this house. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. Two officers stepped forward, cuffing Robert. The metal clicked sharply in the cold air. He didn't resist, only breathed heavily, shoulders trembling slightly. John did it, not me, he whispered, barely audible. Lorraine replied, voice steady. We'll hear you out at the station. As the patrol car started, curious neighbors peered from behind curtains. The red brick house, quiet for years, became the street's focal point. An elderly woman with a coffee mug muttered, I knew something was off. That house always had knocking sounds at night. At PD headquarters, Robert was led to interrogation room 3. The room, bathed in harsh white light, was cold and unforgiving. The smell of stale coffee and old cigarette smoke lingered, as if it had witnessed countless souls dissected by words. Robert sat silently, hands on the metal table, cuffs loose around his wrists. Across from him, Detective Lorraine Hensley opened the thick file, pages rustling in the quiet. You know what I'm going to ask, she began, voice low but not harsh. We're not talking about a missing person anymore, Robert. This is a murder. He looked up, eyes, a mix of exhaustion and wariness. I told you, he said slowly. I didn't kill her. Lorraine didn't respond. She opened a plastic envelope, pulling out a photo of the silver bracelet found in the basement, and placed it gently on the table. Look at this, she said. Recognize it? Found in your house, with the victim's hair and photos. Robert glanced briefly, then turned away. Not mine, he said, voice straining for calm. Lorraine gave a faint smile, her gaze piercing his fragile defense. I know, she said slowly. It's Angela Wade's, and it has your DNA on it. His hand twitched, fingers tapping lightly on the table, a reflex Lorraine knew well. The tremor of someone holding back collapse. You said you didn't know her, she continued. Tone unchanged. But your skin cells are on her bracelet. Her blood is in your car's trunk. Rouge soil is on your tires. What else do I need, Robert? He took a deep breath, then let out a dry, hollow laugh. I don't know anything. I just cleaned up for John. He was the one. Lorraine cut in, voice lower. John's dead, Robert. But you're alive, and we have your car's GPS data you thought was erased. She nodded to Harper, standing behind the one-way glass. A screen lit up, projecting a GPS map with a glaring red trail. Here's the route from April 12, 2006, Lorraine said, pointing to glowing dots. 9:25 p.m. The car leaves Marshall and Gray. 9:33. Stops at the Rouge Industrial Zone. Stays there 48 minutes, then returns to Dearborn Heights at 10:21 p.m. The car's registered to you, insured by you, and the partial plate matches traffic cameras from that hour. Robert looked up, eyes wide. I don't remember, he stammered. I didn't drive it that night. Lorraine leaned forward, her voice no longer that of a cold investigator, but almost a whisper. You're a bad liar, Robert. You forgot we found your fingerprints on the trunk lid. Sweat-stained, fresh, no one else's. You touched it when the blood was still wet. The air grew thick. Only the ceiling vent's hum broke the silence. Harper, behind the glass, scribbled, subject showing signs of stress, rapid breathing, right hand tremor, hoarse voice. Lorraine opened another file, placing it before him. This is the DNA report from Great Lakes Lab, she said, voice steady. Hair, blood, tire soil, all match the Rouge River scene. I don't need a confession, Robert. I just want to know where she is. He bowed his head, hands clenching until they blanched. The room was still. A bead of sweat slid down his temple, hitting the cold steel table. Lorraine didn't press. She knew silence was the strongest tool. After a long pause, Robert looked up. His voice was soft, almost breaking. John said he'd take her far away. I didn't ask where. I thought he just wanted out of Detroit. But you helped, Lorraine said. Not asking but stating. You helped take her to the Rouge Industrial Zone. He stayed silent. She continued. He couldn't do it alone. Someone drove the car, and you drove the Chevrolet. GPS doesn't lie, Robert. He gave a bitter laugh, voice hoarse. You know, she was the only one who ever made John smile for real. He told me, without me, she'd never leave that damn factory. Robert stopped, eyes glazing. I thought he was joking, but the next morning, I saw the car in the garage, covered in mud, and him sitting in the kitchen, still as a statue. I asked, "Where's the girl?" He just said, "She's resting." Lorraine sat still, hearing the chair creak. She knew this moment, when a suspect starts talking unprompted. "He died in 2009, she said softly. "But you're still here, and you know where she is. Don't you, Robert?" He didn't answer. The light bore down on his face, deepening wrinkles, forehead slick with sweat. Then, suddenly, his voice dropped to a near whisper. "She's still there." Lorraine tilted her head, heart racing. "Where?" He looked up, eyes wet. "In the industrial zone, under the cement. She never left that place." He swallowed hard, voice breaking. I never left her either. I still hear the water there when I sleep. It's like it's reminding me she's still down there." His words landed heavily, ringing like an unspoken confession. Lorraine stood, looking straight at him, not with anger, only weary sadness. "Thank you," she said slowly, "for not staying silent today." She signaled the guard to take Robert to holding. As the iron door closed, Lorraine stood before the glass, staring through its faint reflection. There, the man sat, head bowed, shoulders hunched, as if carrying Detroit's entire weight, the city that swallowed Angela Wade, and was now spitting out the truth, piece by piece. On the morning of March 18, 2022, Detroit's sky was overcast, thick gray clouds like a curtain over the Rouge River. In the PD's back lot, the cold case unit's vehicles prepared to move. On the lead SUV, Lorraine Hensley sat silently, eyes on a freshly printed search warrant, Wayne County search order, Rouge Industrial Zone B3. At the bottom was Robert Anderson's trembling signature. He'd agreed to cooperate after 16 years of silence. In last night's final interrogation, he'd said the one thing that silenced the room: "I'll take you there." At 8:15 a.m., the river wind blew strong, salty and damp. The convoy rolled slowly down Jefferson Avenue, turning into the abandoned industrial zone. Before them, crumbling buildings and broken smokestacks rose like the rusted ribs of a long-dead beast. Robert sat in the back, cuffed, eyes half closed. As the car stopped at Lot B3, he opened them, voice hoarse. "Over there, by the broken pillar, near the old cement yard." Lorraine followed his gaze. The spot was a cracked concrete slab, overgrown with reeds and green moss, slick with rainwater. Forensics cordoned off the area, bringing down ground-penetrating radar. Harper, handling tech, lowered the radar to the surface, dragging it slowly. The screen showed steady waves, then a sharp spike, curving strongly at a point nearly 2 meters deep. "Anomalous response," Harper said, eyes glued to the screen. Under the concrete, an oval-shaped solid object, not a pipe or cable. Lorraine stepped closer, crouching, heart pounding. "Mark the spot," she said quietly. "Start a test drill." The concrete saw's screech pierced the cold air. The smell of burning cement and iron mingled, catching in throats. As the first concrete layer broke, gray clay mixed with sand appeared, the same soil from Anderson's tire. Robert sat in the patrol car, watching through the window. His hands shook, eyes lost in the void. "I told you," he whispered to the escorting officer. "I never left her. I just didn't have the courage to come back." The excavation team worked for 3 hours. By noon, radar pinpointed the object's range. At 1.8 meters, a shovel hit something softer than clay, a thick plastic sheet, tightly wrapped around a large object. "We've got it," Harper said, voice catching. "We found a wrapped bundle." Lorraine approached, gloves caked in mud, peering into the open pit. As the plastic was carefully peeled back, the smell of decayed earth and chemicals rose, the scent of time buried alive. Inside were yellowed human bones, mixed with dark fabric from an old uniform. A rusted metal watch encircled the right wrist's bones. Its hand stopped at 9:42. Beside it was a small silver bracelet, identical to the one from Anderson's basement, the other half of Angela's pair. The site fell silent. No one spoke, only the camera's rapid clicks and wind whistling through hollow iron. Lorraine stood over the pit, rain lightly falling on her hair. In that hole was the end of 14 years of waiting, and the start of justice. The remains were transferred to the Wayne County Coroner's Office that afternoon. Each bone, fabric, scrap, and personal item was sealed and labeled. Harper followed every step, silent. Lorraine stood outside the autopsy room, holding cold coffee, watching through the glass. Experts extracted bone marrow for DNA, cross-referencing Angela Wade's 2006 profile. 3 days later, the official report landed on Lorraine's desk. She opened the envelope, eyes scanning the first line, DNA extracted from bone sample, 100% match with reference profile, Wade, Angela M. Confirmed identification. She set the paper down, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Welcome home, Angela." That evening, a brief press conference was held at Detroit Police Department. Camera flashes flared as Lorraine stepped to the podium. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of a long journey. After 16 years, we've recovered the remains of Angela Marie Wade, missing since April 12, 2006. The case is confirmed as a homicide. We thank everyone who never gave up, especially the Wade family. Below, some reporters bowed their heads. One asked, "Was John Anderson the killer?" Lorraine replied, "Evidence shows he was directly involved, but his accomplice after the fact, Robert Anderson, will face charges for aiding and abetting and obstructing an investigation. Both are named in the legal file." After the briefing, Lorraine returned to her office. Alone, she opened the evidence box containing Angela's watch and silver bracelet. The watch was rusted, but its hands remained at 9:42. The moment everything stopped, when Angela saw the final flash of headlights before darkness consumed her. The forensic autopsy report was finalized 12 days after the excavation. The pale yellow folder, stamped Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office, case hash 22-1047, was overseen by Dr. Maeve Roth, Detroit's veteran coroner. Lorraine received a copy Wednesday morning, as the city lay under a thin spring fog. She brought it to her office, set it on the desk, and stared long before opening it. The first page summarized: victim Wade, Angela Marie. Gender female. Age at time of death, 32. Condition partial decomposition, intact skeleton, hair, some soft tissue. She turned to the second page, words printed evenly, like cold knife cuts. Cause of death: severe cranial trauma combined with strangulation. Lorraine read slowly. The coroner described, the skull had 2 parallel fractures at the occipital region, likely from a blunt object, 4-6 centimeters in size. The hyoid bone was fully broken, indicating manual or soft object strangulation. No rib fractures, no penetrating wounds. Soft tissue analysis around the neck showed blood pooling. She was alive during strangulation. Lorraine gripped the paper, a pang shooting up her spine. Sometimes, the truth's cruelty wasn't in images, but in the cold precision of words, begging to be torn apart. The next page noted, no evidence of rape or sexual assault, no foreign DNA in genital cavity or under victim's fingernails. In the margin, Dr. Roth's handwritten note, sexual motive ruled out, likely personal conflict, leading to impulsive attack. Lorraine nodded slightly. This aligned with her suspicions, not random violence. Angela died because someone she knew, spoke to, enraged. Perhaps John Anderson, or Robert, silent for over a decade. She turned to the time of death section. A note stopped her heart for half a beat. Based on tissue decay, soil minerals and bone isotopes, the body was buried within 24 hours of death. So after Angela left Marshall and Gray at 9:20 p.m., she died, and was buried, before dawn the next day. It happened in under 10 hours, swift, clean, planned. Lorraine leaned back, closing her eyes. In her mind that rainy night replayed, Angela crossing the lot, headlights flashing, the silver Chevrolet, then a void. She could almost hear the car doors dry click, wind whistling through old iron, someone's ragged breath in the dark. The final page of the report detailed trace analysis from the scene. Soil and cement around the body matched 99% with samples from suspect Johnny Anderson's tire. Sand and iron dust, traces on the victim's clothing, were consistent with materials used at the Rouge Industrial Warehouse. No evidence of body relocation post-burial. The conclusion was brief but heavy. Homicide confirmed, personal motive suspected. Lorraine closed the file, sitting still. Outside, the distant wail of sirens echoed, Detroit's low hum pulsing like the heartbeat of an aging city. She pulled Angela's photo from the drawer, the one found in the metal box, her young face faintly smiling, eyes gentle. "We finally know what happened to you," Lorraine whispered. That afternoon, she visited the coroner's office to meet Dr. Roth. The doctor sat before a 3D skull scan on her screen. As Lorraine entered, Roth turned, her expression grave. "She fought back," Roth said. Bruises on the forearm bones show Angela raised her arms to shield herself. But within seconds, the first blow stunned her, the second knocked her down. The strangulation came after, likely to ensure she stopped breathing. Lorraine asked softly, "Did she suffer?" Roth paused, then replied, "Not long. Brain stem damage indicates she lost consciousness quickly." The answer, delivered in a clinical tone, stung Lorraine's nose with a prick of tears. For 16 years, Angela was just a name in a file. Now, Lorraine knew her final moments. A real life, with fear, pain, and a misplaced trust in someone familiar. Before leaving the coroner's office, Lorraine paused at the evidence table. The metal watch frozen at 9:42, the silver bracelet, and the dark green fabric scrap. She whispered, "This is all she carried that night." Dr. Roth nodded. "And now it's the evidence to help her rest." 2 weeks after the forensic report was finalized, the Angela M. Wade case file was officially transferred from investigations to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. That morning, Lorraine Hensley stood in the third-floor courthouse hallway, clutching a file over 400 pages thick. Everything she and her team had compiled over 2 years. On the cover, bold text read, "State of Michigan versus John E. Anderson," stark on gray paper, dry but carrying the soul of a case. Inside the meeting room, Assistant Prosecutor David Norcross, head of cold case prosecution, opened briefly. "We have DNA, GPS, physical evidence, and a partial confession. Now we finalize the legal process." He flipped through the draft indictment. Primary charge, second-degree murder. Intentional but unplanned. Secondary charge, concealment of a corpse. Together, they could lead to life imprisonment. Lorraine presented the evidence chain. She started with DNA. Hair on the bracelet matched Anderson's DNA 100%. Soil under the tire, microscopic blood in the trunk, and cement dust on his clothes all matched the Rouge Industrial Yard. The victim's bracelet, found in the basement's metal box, contained mixed DNA from both. Norcross nodded, scribbling notes. Next was GPS. Lorraine opened her laptop, displaying traffic monitoring data recovered from 2006. Anderson's silver Chevrolet left Marshall and Gray at 9:32 p.m., stopped at the Rouge Industrial Zone at 9:58. It stayed there 48 minutes, returning to Dearborn Heights at 11:02. Angela vanished within this window. She then emphasized timing. Forensics confirmed the victim died and was buried within 24 hours of leaving her shift. The killer acted that night. No signs of multiple body transports. This aligns perfectly with Anderson's movements. Norcross capped his pen, looking up. "Any direct witnesses?" Lorraine replied, "None. But we have gas station footage. The car passed by, plate blurry but rear light, matching his model. More crucially, his indirect confession during interrogation. She's still there. I never left her." The room fell silent for a moment. A young attorney whispered from the back, "That's enough to sway a jury." Norcross looked at Lorraine, then said slowly, "We can't charge first degree due to lack of premeditation, but second degree is ironclad. I want all documents reviewed chronologically to eliminate any doubt. Over the next 3 days, Lorraine and the forensic team combed through every piece. They reconstructed the crime scene map, numbered evidence, cross-checked 2006 reports with 2022 DNA results, and verified old seals in Wayne County's evidence vault. In a rusted steel box, Lorraine found a dark green fabric scrap with cement dust, overlooked before. She sent it for further testing. Results confirmed it was Angela's work uniform, matching material from Anderson's car. On April 8, 2022, the prosecutor's office received the complete file. The final report, 423 pages, included 87 pages of statements, 142 pages of forensic analysis, 41 pages of images, 19 pages of GPS data, and 134 pages of appendices. The opening stated, based on the totality of evidence, probable cause established for prosecution under Michigan Penal Code Section 750, 317, and Section 750. 160. Norcross signed, stamped it red, and slid the file back to her. We're ready. Lorraine looked through the large glass window, where Detroit gleamed under scattered rain. Relief mixed with weight in her chest. 16 years ago, she was a rookie. Now she'd brought a case to its end. If anything gives you peace, Norcross said, remember, this isn't just justice for Angela Wade, but a reminder that Detroit keeps its promises to the forgotten. That afternoon, forensics handed all evidence to the sealed storage unit. DNA samples were secured in specialized bags, placed in a numbered freezer, C-214. Lorraine signed the final transfer form, her signature firm. In November 2023, Detroit entered an early winter. On the first day of trial, light snow blanketed the Wayne County Courthouse. News vans lined St. Antoine, antennas raised like frozen needles in the fog. A brass sign, State of Michigan vs. John E. Anderson, hung outside courtroom 3B. A 16-year cold case finally brought to light. Inside, pale yellow light bathed oak walls. Lorraine Hensley sat in the second row behind the prosecution, clutching her file. Up front, prosecutor David Norcross prepared his opening. Across the aisle, John Anderson, 51, silver-streaked hair, sat motionless. His orange prison jumpsuit didn't hide his former neighborly demeanor. His eyes were empty, occasionally dropping to his cuffed hands. At 9 a.m., Judge Marianne Keller struck her gavel 3 times, her voice clear. Case number 2023 CR 482. Trial of defendant John E. Anderson, on 2 charges, second-degree murder and concealment of a corpse. Prosecution, begin your presentation. Norcross stepped to the center, scanning the room before speaking slowly, his voice resonating in the cold air. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, 16 years ago, a woman named Angela Wade vanished on her way home from work. 16 years without a grave, without answers. Today, we're here because the truth has risen from the Rouge River's soil. He raised an evidence board, GPS map, crime scene photos, sealed samples. On a large screen, a reenactment played, the silver Chevrolet passing Marshall and Gray's gate, headlights flashing, a woman turning with a smile. Her last moment, Norcross said. After that, no one saw her again. He continued with the investigation's logic, from the silver bracelet, hair, microscopic blood, to GPS data perfectly matching Anderson's route. Norcross's voice was steady, firm, not dramatic, but chilling. Each sentence nailed shut the coffin of denial. When witnesses were called, Lorraine took the stand. She stood tall in her black police uniform, badge glinting under the lights. Detective Lorraine Hensley, the judge confirmed, do you swear to tell the truth? I do. Norcross asked, can you describe the process of discovering and excavating the victim's remains? Lorraine detailed the ground-penetrating radar, cracked concrete, plastic wrap, bones, clothing. The watch stopped at 9:42. Her voice stayed calm, but her hand tightened on the stand's edge when mentioning the silver bracelet, the small detail that reopened the case. The defense attorney objected, arguing her testimony was emotional, not proof of intent. But Norcross, unfazed, pointed to the screen displaying DNA results. "This isn't emotion, it's science. The defendant's DNA on the bracelet, in the car, in the soil where the body was found. No one else." The trial spanned 3 days. Headlines read, "Cold Case 2006 opens in Detroit. Truth buried beneath concrete." The Wade family sat in the back row, Janice, Angela's sister, clutching an old photo of the two at the factory gate. On the 4th day, Anderson testified. Gone was his defiance. He stared at the floor, voice hoarse. His attorney requested permission for him to speak. "I didn't mean to kill her," Anderson began, eyes drifting. "That night, we argued. She wanted me to repay a debt. I grabbed her arm, she pulled away. I held on. Then she fell. I panicked." Norcross stepped forward. "You claim it was accidental, yet you buried her under concrete and hid it for 16 years. Why?" Anderson's voice broke. "I was scared. I thought, if no one found her, I could forget." The courtroom was silent. The clerk's pen scratching sounded unnervingly clear. Judge Keller looked at the defendant. "Were you aware your actions took a human life and caused her family over a decade of suffering?" Anderson bowed his head, silent. That afternoon, Norcross closed his argument with a sentence that echoed through the room. "Justice never dies. It just waits for someone patient enough to dig it up." On November 24, 2023, the jury returned after 4 hours. The foreperson stood, voice restrained. "We find the defendant, John E. Anderson, guilty on both counts." No murmurs followed. Lorraine heard only Janice's exhale from the back, mingling with the sound of snow outside. Judge Keller delivered the sentence. For second-degree murder, this court sentences John E. Anderson to 35 years in Michigan State Prison, no parole. For concealment of a corpse, an additional 10 years, served concurrently. The sentence is effective immediately. Anderson slumped, shoulders trembling slightly. No one knew if it was remorse or collapse. Lorraine watched him cuffed and led away, light glinting off the cold metal. She felt no triumph, just a necessary end. Post-trial, news exploded. The Detroit Free Press ran a bold headline, "16 years of silence ended. Justice for Angela Wade." Evening broadcast showed Lorraine leaving the courthouse, snow falling around her shoulders. She said one line to the cameras, "Justice delayed is still justice." Driving back, she passed Jefferson Avenue, where missing Angela M. Wade posters once hung. Now, only peeling paint remained. Lorraine stopped, looked at Detroit's snowy night sky, and whispered in the cold, "We did it, Angela." Streetlights cast red glows on wet snow, like the city itself bowing to bid farewell to a woman buried too long, and now named again before justice. On the morning of December 2, 2023, Detroit remained frigid, as if shaking off snow. In the red-brick Detroit Police Department, the second-floor briefing room was lit early. A large sign behind the podium read, "Cold Case 2006 solved after 17 years." Reporters from local stations crowded, microphones aimed, cameras rolling. Lorraine Hensley stood behind the curtain, hands trembling slightly at the sign. 17 years, 3 people reduced to photos, 17 years of nights poring over old files, faded pictures, and no new lead notes. Now, Case D-0-6421, Angela M. Wade's disappearance, could finally close. Chief Randall Monroe spoke first, his voice deep through the speakers. 17 years ago, a woman vanished in a rainy Southwest industrial night. Today, we announce officially that case is solved. The perpetrator, John E. Anderson, has been sentenced to 35 years without parole. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Monroe gestured to the screen behind, displaying crime scene photos, the silver bracelet, and Angela's face. "This is the result of persistence, new technology, and people who refuse to let truth stay buried," he said, eyes turning to Lorraine. Lorraine took the podium, holding only Angela's small photo, her voice soft but firm. "When I reopened this case, it was just old papers in Wayne County's archive, but each page carried the breath of someone waiting to be named. I didn't do this alone. This was the team, forensics, and those who believed every missing person deserves an answer. A reporter asked, "Detective Hensley, how do you feel with the case closed?" She looked up, eyes weary but resolute. "Our work never truly ends. But for Angela, I think she's finally home." After brief applause, Chief Monroe presented her with a Distinguished Service Award. On the cold metal plaque, words were etched, "For relentless pursuit of truth in case D06421. Lorraine accepted, a faint smile flickering, fragile as a winter morning's breath. In the back, Janice Wade, Angela's sister, silently wiped tears. After the briefing, she approached, shaking Lorraine's hand, whispering, "Thank you for not forgetting my sister." Lorraine replied, voice low, "No one deserves to be forgotten, Janice. She's at rest now." As reporters left, the DPD posted an official statement online, case file D06421. Angela M. Wade, missing person, Detroit 2006. Status, closed. Disposition, homicide, solved. Responsible, John E. Anderson, convicted November 24, 2023. The original file, with all evidence, maps and DNA reports, was sealed in an iron box marked D06421, transferred to the National Center for Unresolved Cases in Quantico, Virginia. Lorraine personally signed the final form, her handwriting neat, transferred and archived, case fully resolved. That afternoon, she stood in the basement archive, eyeing rows of file boxes like shadows of time. Each bore numbers, forgotten names. She touched another, D05187, an unsolved 2005 missing person case, then exhaled softly. "Your turn's coming." Leaving the building, Detroit's drizzle fell. Across the street, traffic lights cast red glows on wet pavement, reflecting the old brass sign at the DPD gate. "To protect and serve." Lorraine paused, looked up, and gave a faint smile. She felt no loud joy, only quiet peace, the kind that comes from guiding a lost soul home. One case closed, but its echoes lingered. Angela Wade was no longer just a victim, but a symbol of stories retold after years of silence. Somewhere in this city, as wind blew over the Rouge River, a faint echo lingered, like a reminder. Justice may sleep, but it never dies. The story of Angela Wade and the 17-year pursuit of justice is more than a closed criminal case. It's a mirror to deeper issues in American society today. Trust in the legal system, the value of technology, and the community's duty to not let anyone be forgotten. In a U.S. facing tens of thousands of missing persons cases yearly, the detail of a silver bracelet with overlooked DNA in storage for over a decade reminds us that justice can be delayed, but science and persistence can reclaim it. Thanks to Detective Lorraine Hensley's dedication, a cold case was revived, proof that humans and technology together can mend the seemingly impossible. In today's America, where trust in institutions sometimes wavers, this story offers a vital lesson. Truth doesn't find itself, people must seek it. Like Lorraine, who never deemed an old case hopeless, we must learn not to give up just because something is too old, too small, or too distant. In personal life, this means revisiting forgotten relationships, unaddressed mistakes, or unkept promises, because persistence can yield results time once hid. When Detroit's community founded the Angela Wade Foundation, they showed compassion remains America's core, a nation that rises from loss. The lesson is simple: in a vast, sometimes cold society, one person's belief, one person's action, can rekindle truth and justice. Thank you for following Angela Wade's justice journey to its end, where Detroit proved no truth can stay buried forever. Please subscribe to the channel to explore more revived cold cases, where justice, though late, always finds its way back.